So going into this project, I would like to address real quick that I have a little anxiety in listening to it because I've already heard Nowhere to Go. And I did listen to a little bit, even though I haven't heard the full track. I listened to a little bit of, I think, The Mint, or is it The Tint? I forgot the name of the track. But I have a little anxiety only because Earl is going in a bit of a new musical direction, at least when it comes to him and what he's shown us with his discography thus far. I think when he's done features that were amazing and allowed the artist that he was featured with to take control of the musical direction, I think he fared really well in those situations, like on his contribution to Really Doe off of Atrocity Exhibition, Danny Brown's album that came out in 2016, or we look at, his contribution to Pinata from Freddie Gibbs. I thought that was a really great contribution, a really great star feature from Earl. Even the 23-second feature that we got off Vince Staples' FM record, I thought was pretty good. It left me wanting more. But hearing tracks like Nowhere to Go, definitely, I feel like it's gonna give me something to talk about, right? So I really don't have much to say. I'm excited for new Earl. I want to get into it. I want to listen to it. I want to digest it. I want to see how I feel on it. And we're just gonna talk about it from there. You can't come at me because the water is clearly here.
The only thing clear as day is your alcoholism.
All right, it's clearly. The album is also pretty damn short at only 25 minutes, and since I've already listened to one track that's almost 2 minutes, that's about 23 minutes. So track number 1, Shattered Dreams.
Niggas need it. Mask on, we trick or treating. Back off, stand off, it's all buckshot into my ceiling. Why ain't nobody tell me I was bleeding? I get it clean. Why ain't nobody tell me I was sinking?
Oh my God. This is a great track. I'm surprised. Wow. I wasn't expecting that first track after what I heard from Nowhere to Go. I'm really going to be paying attention to how he expresses himself lyrically for this track or for this album, and also just if he can find ways to express himself sonically, because I think that's going to be a central theme to this project as well, not just him rapping, him kind of also expressing his mental state at the time of recording these tracks, or trying to in some way connect his lyrics to the sonic design of some of these tracks, the music design of some of these tracks. I think it's interesting how at one point in the song he asks why nobody told me I was bleeding, why nobody told me I was sinking, kind of like, I'm assuming him saying that he was around people that were watching him fall, around people that were watching him deteriorate. I wish someone would have tap me on my shoulder or something like that. I mean, that could be what he means. I don't know. Next track is Red Water.
I was sing, I ain't know that I could leave. Pop call me sleep, gotta keep it brief. Lock and load, fingers on my soul. This is 23. Blood in the water, I was walking in my sleep.
All right, the production there, very glitchy, very stop and start. It still had, even though it was very glitchy and very all over the place, it still had a theme of repetition. It still, had a constant loop, even though it was very glitchy. And I do like that Earl stayed consistent in terms of volume through the remainder of the track. I think it helps or paints this atmosphere of distortion, this atmosphere of discombobulation in his life, especially when he's talking about watching himself sink, even detailing, how he felt in regards to his father. I just don't really see myself returning to the track, though. Kind of off-kilter mixing. I understand the intentional distortion in the track. It just doesn't make for great music for me, even if it adds to his overall point. I'm not really seeing myself returning to this track specifically. The first one, definitely, because it had a really nice groove to it, a really nice atmosphere. I don't know what sample he was using, but it definitely worked for what he was trying to introduce. But this one here, I don't really think it does much for me. Track number 3 is Cold Summers.
Substances, no cuddles, the bases is all covered. Niggas come in the door and smoke something, choke up on a slugger, muffle my pain and muzzle my brain up. Really, I'm just making sure my promise is kept. Chunk horny as shit, we on the loose, niggas know what it is.
It reminds me of some maybe partial, like a little. Okay, a little Mad Villainy inspired.
I guess what I mean when I say Mad Villainy is just these looped instrumentals and this kind of lack of adjustment to the beat, the kind of rigid, cold, dead style delivery reminds me so much of MF Doom on this album. I guess in a way, I feel like this is kind of Earl Sweatshirt's Mad Villainy, just to a degree. It's just the instrumentals; they just really get me. Some of them are just so soul inspired, and that's what I got on that album more often than not. Nowhere near as glitchy, but definitely down the same lane, if you're asking me.
It's just nothing exciting yet. You know what I mean? It's nothing exciting. Nothing's happening. Even with the production on this track being a little bit better than the track before it, personally, I just don't really see how that track seemed to hold back musically and more to emphasize sound. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, "Well, music is sound," but no, it doesn't really focus on rhythm. It didn't really focus on melody. It seemed more so to focus on taking that sound or the element and kind of highlighting it in a way, less than it is trying to cause some kind of rhythm. With that, I just think Earl is kind of rapping in an atmosphere more than he is rapping over like a song for this track. I like how he refers to muzzling up his brain to kind of shield himself or kind of maintain and keep the pain. It's not something you should just freely give out. Next track, Nowhere to Go, gave me a lot of where Earl is mentally as well. Again, as far as replay value for the track, I don't really know how much of it has. It's still taking me some time to adjust to a track like that, even though it is interesting. I don't really know how often I'll return to it. The next track, December 24th.
We go at it, ho. How you want them rib smoke, family? 10 toes, know you want your shit already. Don't think he said he pro-violence, but it's gonna be your problem if he did, though. Bang like too malice, too callous for your biz taste. Off the strength, that's how it is. Say, you die and then you live, huh, bro? We been took you past.
There's a lot to unpack with this song. Like, I like how he, I guess, is taking control of the atmosphere rather than being swallowed up by it. It's like he's trying to create in this new space as opposed to being threatened or intimidated by this style of production. And it's not like too far off. A track like this in the intro track aren't too far off some of the tracks we got off I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, or off Doris. While Earl has a very direct delivery, the thing I like about him is there's a lot of layers to his lyrics. It's not just so cut and clear like you would get maybe from Pusha T or maybe you would get from a Meek Mill. Whenever he does seem to reference life in the street, he seems to reference it in a more poetic and angry fashion, or a less emotional fashion than the rest of his contemporaries, in my opinion. I think that dead, really harsh delivery can kind of like add to the loneliness and the solitude that he's trying to represent for this album too. So it's definitely a track I'm going to give a lot more listens to because I kind of want to, you know, just get out. I want to soak all of it in. Track number 6, On the Way.
Really swinging, I peruse like a native would do. What I'm thinking I should do for the sake of myself. Stay in them. See you shooting, but your angles was trash. Don't play with us. I revisit the past. Pour wine and pages of past. Mama say don't play with them scat.
Hold up, because there's so much. I can't look at this and then not say that he's not talking about shooting with a camera and your angles is trash, and shooting with a gun and your aim is trash. I don't know if that's what he means.
Make the mouth breathe his frown. Choose a team, 3 a crowd, 12th Street. I kept some lean around. Help me, it's been a minute since I seen a decent count.
These are great beats. These are great instrumental transitions. Like, this is great. Tracks like that, I would just love for Earl to explore more, because it'd be interesting to see how his delivery would impact the track being more centered around a certain mood or a certain atmosphere, while Earl comes in with a less enthusiastic one. And I think that always has helped him, especially when we got tracks that are a little bit more R&B or a little bit more soul, a little bit more jazzy, like the feature track that he did on Pinata. I thought tracks like that just kind of like, it made me feel for Earl more, having that dead delivery in this soulful space. But here, I think it works decent enough. So all I do know about Standing on the Corner is, as far as the production is concerned, I know that their thing is kind of bringing forth old to the new. I will say it helps to deliver Earl's thoughts a little bit better, personally, just from what I'm listening to, but I don't know if it sounds natural. Like, I like when Earl, the beats just sound really unclean. They sound pretty dirty. And so when I'm listening to it, I feel like they pulled it directly from that era where the artists who probably sung and rapped over these instrumentals and crooned over these instrumentals probably sounded around the time period that the pieces of music were made. And so now we have Earl, who I don't really believe is as vintage when it comes to whatever samples they may be using. I don't know if he sounds as natural over beats like this that sound a little bit, outdated or a little bit less fresh and clean cut, I guess you could say. Y'all feel free to let me know how you feel about that. It's just, from what I'm getting, it's just not as, all right, I feel like it's just, all right, smack him on the beat. I feel like with a track like this, distorting him in a way or adding that static to him in a way kind of would help the track a little bit more. There was like a hint in that track of where he seemed to be alluding to the idea that lean is the is the medication for the stresses of drug dealing. Unless I get a good count, which is a good profit for that day, then I'm gonna turn to drugs. And it's kind of weird that to be quote unquote in the business quote unquote of drug dealing, some people also turn to those same things and those same kind of substances in order to cope with their lack of revenue, their lack of business, their lack of importance, I guess. Next track, The Mint featuring Navy Blue. I actually really enjoyed a part of this song, so I'm going to finish listening to it. See, he sounds in the track right now. I like it. That piano is great.
Shoulders with the devil in disguise. Shoulder level water on the rise. Cause mine, evidently it was written like knives. I was in the kitchen with that nigga Mike. Early morning, wash my swollen hands. Hit the showers, cleanse my soul and crash. Scramble and out of that. Go behind
He's just
the back.
going. Piano in that track is amazing. The way Earl is delivering is amazing. Earl makes a lot of references to bleeding out on this album. I wonder if there's anything deeper to it with that. All I really get from this track when it comes to Earl is him having control over not necessarily how he feels, but how to deal and how to cope with it now. I like how he does say, I never, even though I hit this, I never promote hitting the spliff on over the underpass, meaning like I never would promote or push anyone listening to the shit that I make. I would never push them or make it seem like it's cool to do this, or do it irresponsibly. Track number 8, The Bends.
I've been master all of the strings in my hand.
Yeah.
Came a long way from the Dickies and Dirty Jan Sports. Shit changed, now the checks that we see in his hands some real.
When it comes to listening to an album like this, it's really difficult for a guy like me not to get looped up into the whole idea of his thoughts about depression and take some of these songs at more than surface value, when it's intentional for some of them to just be what they are and nothing more than that, and add to the overall experience and atmosphere of the album itself. But that being the case, and these being labeled as some rap songs, makes me think that it's not supposed to even be listened to as a full rap album. And so when I look at some of these tracks as their solo performances are concerned, I see the lack of replayability, and that weakens the experience for me, personally.
Next track is Lucy.
Found a reason to live. Doubt could be in abyss. Keep fallacy. They call harder, they fall. I figured niggas was bold. They proved me wrong quick. Long trip, sifting through memories over dumb splits. Young men flying soliloquy off the tongue tip. Black woman I can't thank. Crying when I told you these are last days. Sell them as metal with mines. My state live visions and fires. Niggas face looking like I stumbled out of pit. $100 chip. I piss problems out the bottle empty. Mama says.
I think I'm getting to the point in the album where I'm just like, it's not my taste. You know what I mean? Like, I can nod, I can rock to it, I can close my eyes and try to be quote unquote one with it. I just don't think some of it's working. And it's really hard to resonate when you're thrown off balance by the production and also trying to hear what the rapper, the artist who's giving a pretty decent performance, when you're trying to hear what he wants to say. It can be kind of difficult to do both, be thrown off balance by production, but still try to get a grip or an understanding of where the artist is coming from. He does make mention and reference here to, not looking in the sky. I'm assuming that he means there's not really a point or a reason for things maybe like religion or false idols, or it's no use daydreaming, meaning it's no use wondering and constantly playing these gymnastics and going through these stories in your head when you live in a solidified reality. It's challenging trying to accept this production and accept the musicality of this project and still hold Earl to a high regard lyrically and still try to see where he's coming from. It's a task, I guess you could say. Track number 11 is Eclipse.
Say goodbye to my openness, total eclipse of my shine that I grown to miss from holding shit in. Open my lids, hoping I don't total my shit. That's me though, play the game, no cheat code. Had to leave from the free throw.
Track number 12 is Veins.
Who came before me in the game? We giving praise and glory to your name, kid. Hair got natty, let it settle on my face. I've been eating good, you can see it in my tummy. Trying to stay fast and trying to get through the day. I'ma play it back, I ain't in the showing face.
That track, I feel like Earl is kind of using himself as a representation, maybe to other artists who are coming in to kind of keep the pace and slow it down, not to live life a little too fast. Earl has some pretty dark lines here when it comes to explaining him wanting his mother to bury him in a way.
It's almost like the instrumental in the aesthetic is trying to take Earl while he's rapping, and he's somehow keeping it at bay by this onslaught of lyrics. I just find it strange. He's giving himself just enough room and keeping the aesthetic and the atmosphere and the track itself away from him, but just enough to where you can still feel like if he doesn't keep rapping and maintain his intensity or his dead style delivery, that it's going to take over him, if that makes sense.
I'm going to go into track number 13, Playing Possum.
Not carry impossible me.
Thank you to my brothers.
Displeased.
Love, and I understand that it's an ode to his parents. And I love that he got, his father on the track. I can't do it. I can't move into this track. I don't know why. Obviously it's for him more than it is for people to listen to. So I don't really feel bad for not getting it or not feeling it, because it's something that he felt. It's not something that I should feel. Next track is Peanut.
Saw you on the stage, left it not a maze. Thought you up in A, now you done it braids. Flushing through the pain, depression, this is not a phase. Bless my pops, she set him off and not an hour late. Still in shock and out my heart out, but I'm not afraid. My Uncle Hugh.
I think this track really captures the feeling, sonically and vocally from Earl, the feeling of being discombobulated mentally and depression. I think it really hones in on how that feels, I guess, and how cloudy it can be, and how distorted the vision can be, and how dark it seems. Track number 15 is Riot.
See, when the track not long before this album ends, I believe it's track number 14, when that comes on and Earl says this isn't a phase, and then the final track is a track where Earl literally says nothing and we just hear these instruments and this just solo production, I think it just aids in the idea maybe that Earl allowed himself to be taken over instead of trying to fight this atmosphere, instead of trying to fight these feelings. He allowed them inside and learn to control or learn to live with them better, as opposed to denying them or making himself feel weak for having them. Honestly, if I'm to look at this album, just hearing it, it sounds like a dismembered Earl Sweatshirt that manages to get all his body parts back and sews them together himself.
That track and the end of the album, all I can guess is that Riot is in some way, since it seems so triumphant, in some way it's a way to describe, I won't necessarily say happiness, but control. Because this is the first track I feel like he's got a good grip. Sonically, there's a grip on this track. And it doesn't include his vocals at all. And I think that's interesting only because I feel like when you are like sometimes you're least expressive, that's when you are at your most peaceful sometimes, like when you don't say anything, when there's nothing for you to say, when there's nothing for you to feel. It's having a track like this that's structured and kind of to the point, I think is a good representation of having a grip, you know, or having control or having dominance over something personally. When it comes to this whole album, this is weird, man. It's not weird in the sense that it's not weird in the sense that like it sucks. It's just an odd transition. It's compared to Earl's previous, more dark, more consistent, obviously less melodic, but still very control over the pacing. This seems a lot more just, I don't know what to do. I'm kind of all over the place. I'm feeling this way, this way, this way. And again, while all that could be intentional, I just think it's such a, I won't say huge leap, but it's a definite step in a different direction from his previous work. And the risks that he takes, at least sonically on this album, I can commend him for, even if the replay value for some of this album isn't gonna hit like that. Personally, I love that he references his depression and references how much of a bad place he was in, even when he seemed to be in a better place, to the people that were around him, asking multiple times, multiple questions about why no one told him that he was in such a bad state, to the point where it kind of probably hit him out of nowhere that he had all these issues to work out. You don't just get them from nowhere. People have to have been seeing this for a while and just not saying anything. So I think that's kind of where he thinks on it, just a little bit. I don't think he's putting the blame on others, but I think he's just realizing, how did no one see how bad I was? I like that there are a lot of parts in this album that can be driven from soul, from jazz, but for the most part, he takes a lot of risks here. He definitely goes out on a whim, and he expresses himself in a way he has never expressed himself before, allowing himself to do so over such I guess unorthodox production, such glitzy and glitchy, such production I wouldn't consider glamorous at all to describe how he's feeling, along with how he's feeling lyrically. I think was a good move on his part. I just don't know how strong of an attempt it was. I don't really have that many albums in this vein to compare it to say this album did it better or this album did it worse. So while I'm looking at Earl with a thumbs up, I definitely think that this album, as far as its mixing is concerned, as far as some of the topical designs of some of the songs, as much as I want to give him credit for all of that, I think at the same time, it kind of works to his detriment, because some of these songs aren't going to have as much replay value. It might ruin the aesthetic for some of them. And I do like I said, the theme going on here, but I don't know if it's something that musically is good enough for me to keep returning to want to keep hearing the story. I feel like once I decipher everything he said lyrically, that's going to be the end of my time with this album. And I didn't want that to be the case. But I don't want to go too crazy with my thoughts about it. I mean, it's still something that I'm having a hard time digesting, so I'm going to give it a lot more listens, see how I feel about it. But as it stands right now, Earl Sweatshirt, some rap songs. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see you next time. And yeah, let me know how you feel about this album. Please tell me, because maybe I'm just wrong here, and I'm just trying to, I'm just getting something that's not supposed to be gotten. Like, let me know how you feel about it, and that'll be that. Until next time, I'll see you. Peace.